Well, today we're talking protective orders with local attorney Lashandra Peoples-Johnson, what they can and can't do, how to get one, and what kind of legal process you should be prepared for if you do go down that road. So good morning, Lashandra.
Good morning.
I wanted to, first talk about who can get one. In other words, who can you file one against? I know in 2021 there was a case of a man who was killed, Stephen Bernius. He had filed for a protective order against his roommate, but was denied. So who can get a protective order? Roommates included? Does it have to be someone you live with, someone that you're married to?
So anyone. So this is a recent change in law. Like you said, it used to be where you had to be in a domestic relationship in order to receive a protective order in some scenarios. However, the law has recently changed, which allows for anyone to file a protective order against another adult as long as you file a police report.
Okay, so I wanted to also show people kind of the process of the protective orders and what they should be prepared for legally, because there's a lot of things that you have to go through. So let's just start off by at the beginning. If I'm going to file a protective order, what do I do?
So I want to first say just briefly what a protective order is.
Yes.
So a protective order is a quasi-criminal proceeding that is established by Oklahoma's Protection from Domestic Abuse Act. And the way it happens is a protective order is issued in two stages. So the first stage deals with the emergency protective order. So a plaintiff or the person requesting protection files a petition along with accompanying paperwork. And this is done ex parte, which means that at this time the defendant is not able to give their side of the story. Based solely on this paperwork, the judge will decide if an emergency protective order should be granted. If it is granted, then the sheriff will serve the defendant, and we move into stage 2. This is the hearing stage. And so a hearing is held about 2 weeks after the initial petition is filed, and at that time both the plaintiff and the defendant can present evidence as to whether this emergency protective order should be continued. If the judge decides it should be, then a final protective order is given, and the judge will decide how long that should last.
What are some of the options of how long it can last in Oklahoma?
So it can last 30 days, a year, and you can even have a permanent protective order. There are some statutory triggers that allow a protective order to last permanently.
In what kind of situations do you typically advise people to get a protective order as a plaintiff? And hey, I want to get a protective order. What kind of situations?
So the protective order is meant to be a deterrent against certain types of behaviors: stalking, harassment, domestic abuse, rape. Those are the most common scenarios where someone would seek a protective order.
Okay, I'm also wondering, the potential consequences of a protective order. So if you're the defendant, you have it filed against you, what are the consequences for your life?
So you often ask me, should a lawyer be involved in this process? Although an attorney is not necessarily needed in the petition phase, if you're the defendant, you should definitely have an attorney for the hearing phase, because there are consequences. You can lose your access to firearms. You could have to surrender the firearms you have. You could have to pay the fines, costs, and fees associated with the plaintiff's case. And ultimately, it could go on your permanent record, and this is quasi-criminal.
Yeah, and I wanted to explore that a little bit, because obviously it's not a felony conviction if you have a PO against you, a protective order, but it can be easily searched by an employer. It can be found in public records very easily.
Correct.
So tell me about a little bit more quasi-criminal. I know this probably, this is complicated legal, but I just want people to know the consequences of it.
So it is a civil proceeding technically, however, there are criminal consequences. If it is filed against you, if the court issues a protective order and there's a violation that's reported, so someone continues the behavior, then law enforcement gets involved. You can go to jail. So that's the criminal piece to it. And
there's a protection for the person filing it, the defendant, right? Because if someone violates a protective order, then that can be pursued legally, because the defendant is trying to protect themselves, right?
Yeah, well, the plaintiff is trying to protect themselves.
Oh, the plaintiff, yes.
Yes.
The person filing it against.
Correct.
Okay, well, this is all really interesting. If you missed any of this, I know, sometimes these can get complicated. Protective orders, we're going to post this on our website, newson6.com, so folks can go back and watch through. But we appreciate it, Lashandra, as always, with Johnson Cephas Law. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.